Today, the Below Average Joe's MMA show present the weekend preview. And we have a jam-packed show for you guys talking about everything and anything from UFC 284 in the Outback, champion versus champion, as one man, the pound-for-pound number one man in the company, Alexander Volkanovski, looks to cement his legacy as an all-time great as he goes up to 155 pounds and looks to take the lightweight title from the man who is the prodigy of one of the all-time greats, looking to make his legacy separate from one Khabib Nurmagomedov. Islam Makhachev looking to make the first defense of his lightweight title. It's a massive fight, but is it being underpromoted? We'll talk all about it. Also, we have MMA fighters taking over boxing. What's this? Jorge Masvidal announces a jam-packed card for his GameBread Boxing promotion with a bevy of MMA fighters on it. We'll talk about that, all this and more, and it all starts right now. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us, episode 265. Me and Dominic are coming at you with another weekend preview, this time for UFC 284, headlined by a fight that Dominic has been the champion of for months on months. Our most viral Instagram clip to date. 3 to 4 months later, we're still getting likes. There's still debates in the comments. And now we're gonna bring it all in here, Dom, and we're gonna address our views at that time, and we're gonna say, have we doubled down on our takes from 3 or 4 months ago? A lot has happened in between that. And what's really special, Dom, is we're really kicking off a very important next few months in the UFC. We're coming off the heels of a pretty weak card. Derek Lewis, I almost said Alexio
Olenek.
Polar Bear, you know.
You just had to give a throwback to our first episode. That's all.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Next weekend's card's not great, but you talk about the pay-per-views, you know, in the next 4 months here. Massive. Yeah. So we're really kicking off a very special time in the sport, and it's very exciting. So, Dominic, how are you feeling? We're here on Thursday. Feel like we're in the Windy City, but we're not. Just weather be like that sometimes. How are you feeling, Dominic? You're back in the great state of Ohio. You are safe and sound from that terrible drive from Tennessee to Ohio, long one. How are you?
I'm feeling good, man. The wind has allowed me to hunker down in the studio, which is right where I wanted to be on this Thursday evening anyways. We've got a history-making title fight in just about a little over 48 hours from the time we are recording this. So I am absolutely pumped. The weather, you can kind of feel it in the air, like wind aside. The temperatures, springs are coming. Springs are rolling in, and that just means more golfing for me personally and our battling for bogey branch off of the brand. And just, you know, nice weather. The sun's out longer. It's just a happy, good, happy, fun time. So we love that, but we love MMA. That's what we're here to do. I'm doing great, and I hope the same for you as we get rocking.
I'm doing well, Dom. Doing very well. It is windy, but I prefer it. I kind of prefer the way it feels outside right now. It's like high 40. I mean, we're closing in on that 50 mark for temperature. The wind makes me feel like me and Dom are back in our college town, Bowling Green, Blowing Green as they call it in those parts. So it feels like I'm at home a little bit. But yes, like I just said, a massive next few months here, and it all starts with really the main event that feels like it is the biggest of all of them, and yet also feels like it's the smallest of all of them. And let's get into that, Dom. So Islam Makhachev looking to make the first defense of his lightweight title, but in order to do so, he'll have to go through the featherweight champion, the pound-for-pound number one fighter in the UFC, Alexander Volkanovski. He is moving up in weight, looking to become champ. That would make him, that'd make him the fifth fighter, right?
It's got to be around that number. Let's see.
You had Connor, you had Cejudo, Amanda, DC. I think that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you include just 2 division titles, you got Randy Couture. Did BJ Penn do it? I don't know. It's fifth
GSP.
simultaneous. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yep, GSP. So fifth simultaneous. That'd be a massive milestone. He's already very close, if not already there, to like best featherweight of all time.
Hmm.
And this would be just another step in a direction of not just being the best featherweight of time, but maybe being one of the best fighters of
Yeah.
all time, Dominic. So, in order to do so, though, he's going to have to get through Islam, who, even though he's not even made a defense of his title yet, he's already got the cause of being the next great in this lightweight division that's had so many great fighters. Yes, of course, he comes from a great camp. He is the protege of Khabib Nurmagomedov, another all-time great. But Islam Makhachev is also just that dude. And you look at what he did to Charles Oliveira, how thorough of a beating he really put on a guy who had yet to really fall victim to that in such a great reign he had as champion. Islam has the makings of a special talent.
Hmm.
So this is a massive fight for all those reasons. Yet, as we're just a couple days away from fight night, Dom, there's been a lot of talk about this fight, but not for the X's and O's or what are the implications of a win for either guy here. The talk seems to be focused around the promotion of this fight, or dare I say, lack thereof. Now, this is something we have constantly thrown eggs at to our competitors over at Bellator. Not our competitors, but the UFC's competitors.
Hmm.
We've constantly talked about their under-promoting of fights. So I think it's only right that now that people are calling out the UFC for the same thing, we address it here first before we even get into the fight, Dom. Your thoughts on this debate? It all started with Islam actually calling out the company directly. So do you agree with these calls for this being an underpromoted fight? Or do you tend to side with more the UFC that they are either doing enough or maybe there's other reasons for why this is being underpromoted?
I think that for a fight of this magnitude, it is definitely being underpromoted. However, the way that the UFC promotes, and it's pretty consistent for the most part, is that basically it's a 1 week thing in terms of like blasting on social media and whatnot. Now you will get ads on like ESPN on TV for pay-per-views more than a week out. Obviously, I have seen ads for this, but in terms of like a social media presence, I feel like it's relatively consistent that the UFC, they hammer it from 1 week out. From Monday to Saturday is when they just start to drill it. So in that instance, I think it's pretty much the same. But when there's a fight like this, an exception like this, dare I say, we're talking not only champion versus champion, we're talking number 1 pound for pound versus number 2 pound for pound. This is historic stuff that is very, very rare in the sport. Like, yes, we get great fighters that fight great fighters for titles and stuff all the time in MMA, in the UFC specifically. But then this is just the highest echelon that you get, the highest level that you can get to. So, yeah, I think it definitely has deserved more. I just don't know how the UFC would have necessarily went about doing it differently than what they do traditionally. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I have found myself in the middle of all this on Twitter and whatnot this past week and a half.
Yeah, this is a problem. Depending on how you look at it, it's a problem for a while, and it just took this type of fight to kind of shine a light on it. The UFC is so big at this point. They are such a big part of this sport. I mean, they are MMA in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
That just announcing that there's a fight and it's under the UFC umbrella, that's sometimes just enough.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot special that they either one need to do or two that they do to kind of make these fights feel different on their own. Now you'll see certain fighters will take it upon themselves to try to raise the stakes for their fight, get more interest in their fights, and some have worked out. I think that's why we get pretty hard on like Bellator, is because they're already working from behind, but I
Yeah.
feel like they promote at almost the same, they do the same things that the UFC do, but have none of the resources and none of the outlets that are as near as big as like an ESPN
Right.
to carry them. So
Yeah.
they need to do more. The UFC doesn't need to do more, but it does expose a little bit of how they operate when a fight that in a lot of ways is massive in terms of legacy feels like just another pay-per-view. And when you ask her, the question has to be like, what would they do different? What would I have them do differently? And that's a really good question because I don't really have much of an answer for that. And then I kind of think long and hard, Dom, and I'm like, well, what exactly are Islam and Volkanovski doing to make this feel like a bigger fight? And not necessarily Volkanovski. Volkanovski seems to be fine. He's just happy to be in this spot.
Yeah.
But Islam's the one that was complaining about it. So my question
Yeah.
would be, what is he doing to make this fight feel bigger? Now, I don't blame him for not resorting to any sort of tactics that other fighters would go to that maybe would feel like some sort of compromise on his character or who he is. I have nothing but respect for that. But also, you can't just say my fight needs to be more promoted. But what can they do? Like Islam and Volkanovski especially has the track record to prove he's not exactly a big pay-per-view commodity right now.
Right.
Islam's had one main event on pay-per-view. I mean, I think UFC 280 did okay. It was 280, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think it did okay, but I don't think it was necessarily like bringing the house down. And also, I don't think Islam would have been the reason it was doing so to begin with. So, yes, he has the room to grow into like a pay-per-view star like a Khabib did. But let's face it, Khabib really only got to that point because of the rivalry with Conor McGregor. I mean, he really did get a rub from Conor that made him a massive pay-per-view star. He
Right.
probably wouldn't have reached that kind of height if not for that rivalry. Islam doesn't necessarily have that yet. This fight with Volkanovski, they're very cordial for the most part. Like there's a little bit of talk here and there, but it's mostly nothing. And that's great. I think that the legacy implications of it's kind of speak for itself. But no, this isn't going to be a fight that's going to break 1 million pay-per-view buys. It's going to be lucky to break 450,000. And that's a shame. But ultimately, this is a fight for the hardcore fans anyways. Because Dominic, let's face it, nobody really cares about pound-for-pound rankings. I mean, to be clear, like hardcore fans already don't like pound-for-pound rankings. At least the way the UFC does them. So you take casual fans, they don't give two shits about that.
Right.
So if hardcore fans don't care, how do you expect casual fans to care? So this whole number one versus number two pound for pound, I think it's lost on a lot of people. You know, it just, they don't really like okay, who are these guys? Why do I care? We know why we care. We know how big this is for their legacy. But in order to grab casuals, you got to have more, I guess, juice that more on the surface than, you know, the more you dig into this fight, the bigger you realize it is. But it's hard to see on the surface why it matters so much. So that's kind of my 2 cents, Dominic. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that before we kind of talk about the actual fight itself?
I feel like you took what I said and then just elaborated on it, added in your own 2 cents. I'm fine with where we end it.
Yeah, so hopefully we did that justice. I mean, we don't want to focus on it necessarily because we don't want to be a part of the problem here. You know, we want to actually talk up this fight because it is big.
Yeah.
But you do also have to kind of address it since that's been the biggest talking point of fight week. So with that being said, it's a massive fight. And it is, I go back to what we talked about 3-4 months ago, the clip. It's probably our biggest clip ever across any of our socials. Us talking about when this fight got announced. And I went back and watched it just to kind of remember what we said. And the whole thing was Dominic clearly bought in immediately on the hype and the implications of this fight. You raised the question, is this, and I'm going to butcher the exact wording, but is this the biggest the biggest title fight in UFC history in terms of like legacy. I believe that's somewhat what you said, right?
Is it the biggest first title defense for a new
Oh, there
champion?
we go. Yeah. So, and I think my rebuttal was that I would take like a Conor versus Eddie Alvarez at UFC
Right.
205.
Yeah.
Even though you were specifically talking about legacy, I was looking at it like the full enchilada. You know,
Of
the
course.
pay per view buys were obviously bigger. The the time period, considering first event at MSG, and you know, just all the things that went into getting MMA legalized in New York,
Hmm.
the star power of Conor McGregor, the first guy going for two belts simultaneously. It was just really massive. So
Yeah.
I still stand by that. I would put that as like the number one. But honestly, Dom, I got it was a mixed bag of
Yeah.
responses to that. I think a lot of people didn't like it. They didn't like the take that Connor and Eddie was bigger. I was getting kind of flamed a little bit in the comments, and yeah, there was some people that came to my side to
Hmm.
back me up, but I can see though that there is a rabid amount of people that think like this is the fight for a lot of people, and
Hmm.
it deserves that kind of respect. We can split hairs on which fight's the biggest first title defense, which fight is the biggest this or that. But on its surface, on its
Yeah.
face value, it is one of the biggest fights of all time in terms of
Yeah.
legacy. We've talked about
Yeah.
that before. Other fights that were underappreciated but were impacting fights. DC versus Stipe 3, we
Yes.
said was to determine the best UFC heavyweight of all time.
Hmm.
So Dominic, your thoughts on that original video we did when the fight was announced? Has anything changed for you 3 4 months later, or are you still all in on this fight?
I'm definitely still all in. I'm probably honestly even a little bit more excited despite all the promotional stuff we were just talking about, because we know as hardcore fans and people that live and breathe the sport and follow it every day, this is a massive fight. We're talking a brand new champion, but in Islam Makhachev, that a lot of people kind of were just waiting. They were just waiting to see when that gold belt would be wrapped around his waist. He goes out there and disposes of Charles Oliveira, the hottest fighter in the UFC at that current point, and did it with relative ease on the feet and on the ground to become the champion. Now, on an 11 fight win streak, 5 straight wins, Noah, via finish, which, by the way, shuts down any narrative, if it's even still out there, of people thinking Islam's a boring fighter. That's just very far fetched from the truth. Making his first title defense against a man who has won 22 straight fights, who is 12-0 in the UFC, who's made 4 title defenses at 145 pounds, beat one of, if not, he's probably not even viewed as the best now, but at one point he probably was, Max Holloway 3 times. Alexander Volkanovski is as good a talent that we've ever seen in the UFC. Honestly, he's still underappreciated. I was in that camp once, Noah. I look back when this podcast started and how, damn it, he beat Max. Is one of my favorite fighters. I can't like this guy. He's good, but I'm not going to side with him. Every fight since this podcast has been going, and you could probably go back and see the progression of my fandom for Volkanovski. He is an amazing generational talent. His fight IQ, his just everything, the way in which he moves about, the way that he presents himself as an athlete and ambassador for the sport. This is 2 phenomenal fighters coming together to determine who right now is the best mixed martial artist on the planet. That's what this fight is. And it just so happens that if one man wins, he kind of cements his protege status and then can now chase Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev. For Volkanovski, if he goes and gets a second title up a weight class, something that not many people have done, especially at the same time, what would it be? 5 is what we said. It's just historic stuff. We don't see things like this. That's why, whether you're on the side of it being underappreciated, underpromoted or not, you got to just come together on Saturday, sit down and enjoy this, because it's 25 minutes that we won't get again for a very long time.
33 combined wins for these two
It's
as they step
insane.
into the cage
Yeah.
Saturday. That's not a small amount, Dom.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that, but 33 in MMA is not a small number.
Yeah.
And what I want to say, I guess, on top, so regarding my thoughts, I again, a lot of the clip was focused on kind of, is it the biggest first title defense in history or not? I don't know if this was in that clip, but I remember talking about this at that time on that episode. And I made the prediction that I thought Islam Makhachev's going to essentially roll Volkanovski here.
Mm-hmm.
As good as Volkanovski was, I said, I think Islam's going to kind of run through him. I think it's going to, not that Volkanovski can't, make a better account of himself than like Charles did, but that at the end of the day, I thought Islam was going to make this look pretty clean.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone back a little bit on that. And actually what's funny is I've seen a lot of people predicting that very thing.
I have seen that. Yeah.
I mean, just look at the odds. Volkanovski is a plus 300.
Yeah.
Makhachev minus 400. I mean, by the way, that's a weird favorite underdog split there. I don't know why. That feels like, I feel like at a minus 400, Volkanovski should be a bigger underdog, but I don't like if that's the way you're going to do it. But obviously they want to make sure to limit the amount of money people are getting either which way. So I guess where my thoughts have changed, Dom, is I was looking through the resume of Islam Makhachev, and people don't like it when I talk about, the lack of top tier guys that he's beaten. People don't like it when you say that, and that's not really what I'm going to say, because I understand it's not his fault. He's tried to step up and take some of these fights like RDA and others, and it's just not happened. But the guys he has beaten, Charles Oliveira, who obviously how highly I think of him and how much that win did to kind of impact my thoughts on Islam as a fighter. But before that, the Bobby Greens, the Dan Hookers, the Drew Dobers, the Thiago Moises of the world, these are all good fighters. These are all quality wins. Charles kind of separating from the rest of the pack here. But the rest of these guys, and then, of course, Arman early on in their careers, that's a quality win, even though they were both very young.
Right.
What I think has been common through most of Islam's wins, and we'll go past the Arman fight because I don't think that really – it's really this run the last couple years is what I'm focused on.
Yeah, yeah.
What's been very prevalent through a lot of his opponents have been either they have pretty glaring weaknesses that he's been able to exploit, or they are fighters that make mistakes. You look at like Drew Dober clearly had a weakness in his grappling, wrestling, and Islam able to exploit that. Thiago Moises is a great submission practitioner, but doesn't have the wrestling or the strength to handle a guy like Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Green, a little bit weaker on the ground. Dan Hooker, same thing. Charles Oliveira, very talented everywhere, and that's why I was so confident that he was going to win that fight.
Right.
But what had made Charles's run so exciting and also had made it so kind of anxiety-inducing was that he made a lot of mistakes in his fights, and he just always found a way to clear his head, to make the adjustments, and come out looking like $1 million.
Right.
Alexander Volkanovski does not make mistakes, Dom.
He
doesn't
really
make mistakes at all.
Yeah.
And he forces you to react throughout the entire fight. He is constantly throwing feints. He's constantly throwing stuff, even if he doesn't really intend for it to do anything. He's constantly giving you a look.
Yeah.
And it can be very hard for someone. You've seen guys crack under that pressure. Max Holloway had looked at times very much like the better fighter through their first two fights, but he just couldn't do it anymore in that third fight, and he got pummeled because of it.
Yeah.
The Korean Zombie. I mean, that was a tough one to watch. A guy that's as good as the Korean Zombie, who by the end was so defeated.
Yeah.
Brian Ortega had moments of looking like maybe he could get it done, but then when he had that victory kind of taken out of his hands, you could tell, and again, very defeated.
Yeah.
Islam Makhachev is masterful at exposing people's weaknesses, at taking advantage of people's weaknesses. But what is he going to do when he goes up against a guy who has none?
That question. Oh, I already see the social media clip for tomorrow, no, because the way you just worded that was absolutely awesome. But it's so true. Volkanovski, and again, it goes back to me talking about his fight IQ. Every fight, we're seeing a guy not only improve, he's improving leaps and bounds, Noah. He's in his prime, 34, Islam 31 in his prime. We've not been able to see Volk be like severely threatened to an extent that you would imagine Islam can present to him. He was threatened against Ortega, right? Again, he was in 2 submissions. But I'm just going to go off of all these 5 title fights right here that I'm looking at on my screen. Obviously, it's a win streak for Volk. It's 120-ish minutes of fight time because I think he finished Zombie in the 4th round. It was the 3rd or 4th round. Yeah, so around 120 minutes. 1 minute of that combined, he's been not in control of the fight.
That's crazy.
Essentially, that's around what it is. Someone can fact check me down to the seconds if you want.
You might have to put 2 clips. That's a great response there too.
That's the thing. So are we going to see Islam be able to expose something we didn't know existed in Volk's game? Because he has the grappling and the strengths to do that. But if Volkanovski can strongly defend the takedowns, and this fight is on the feet, you want to talk about intrigue. Islam, and I have felt this since the Moises fight, is better striker than Khabib was. And now especially I believe that after like the Oliveira fight in specific. Volk, a lot of people I've been seeing, Noah, and I've never really considered him in this category, but it's pretty true. Volkanovski is one of the best strikers in MMA and in the UFC. What's going to happen if it's on the feet? Volk is going to be 4 inches shorter, but still has a 1-inch reach advantage. Volk somehow is 5'2", not literally, but you get what I'm saying. And he has a longer reach than everyone he fights. It doesn't even make sense. So on the feet, I don't really know. Like, I would think in my head, Islam would be able to do enough to edge him out. But then if you really take a second to think about it, I don't know if that's the case. And Volk may well be able to win the fight should it be standing for 25 minutes. But it's a tall task because I don't know if he can keep it there for 25 minutes.
This is a great point, Dom. And I don't want to set the wrong kind of, I guess, projection of what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that I'm predicting Volkanovski to win now. I'm just saying that this fight, as the days have gotten closer, 4 months ago, whatever, that was where my kind of first thoughts. And since then, I've just came around to this idea of like, I don't know what's going to happen. Because everybody seems to just accept the fact that Islam is going to dominate this fight. And I'm like, I just have a hard time seeing Volkanovski in that kind of position.
I know, right?
Is it possible? Yeah. Yes, because Islam's that damn good. But to me, what's more than likely going to happen here is you're going to have a lot of checkmates here. Just 2 guys that are so good, number 1 versus number 2, clearly the 2 best fighters in the world. And you're going to see a lot of like, not checkmates. What's the word where it's like, I can't remember. Maybe it is. It's not checkmate. It's like where 2 guys, like, there's no more moves that one could possibly make. Like they have basically canceled each other out so much.
A stalemate.
The stalemate. Thank you. Yeah. That's sort of what I could see happening here. Like I could really see just it going to a decision, and they're like, I don't know who's going to win. Like, judges are like, I don't even know. Like you're going to see so much high level MMA here. You're probably going to see both guys have moments of success and their kind of strengths take over at points. Probably momentum shifts each way. A question I want to raise to you, Dom. Have you considered, when you look back at other examples of this, of a guy going up another weight class in pursuit of another belt, or even not, but the biggest examples being like the Daniel Cormier going up to heavyweight, or Henry Cejudo up to bantamweight, even Amanda Nunes for the women, but Conor McGregor up to lightweight, all that. Have you considered what improvements, like I think a lot of people have recognized where Volkanovski may lack due to going up 10 pounds. But have you considered where he may improve going up 10 pounds? Daniel Cormier, ever known as a knockout artist at light heavyweight. What's he do when he goes up with the slightest of punches ever, puts out Stipe Miocic.
Yeah.
I mean, just incredible. So I think that has to be taken into account here, that those 10 pounds, Volkanovski may be a small guy and this and that, but you add on 10 pounds, what kind of power are we going to see from this guy who, let's not forget, was over 200 pounds at one point in his life and was playing rugby? Yes, he's not shown to be this huge power threat at featherweight. He's typically a guy that really takes you in the deep waters, puts it on you for the entirety of the fight. But now you get the extra 10 pounds, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but we've seen reason to believe Henry Cejudo finished Marlon Moraes when he went up 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor, he was a knockout threat at featherweight and at lightweight, so it don't matter. But I could really see Volkanovski, Islam maybe being caught off guard by the power of Volkanovski and having to respect that and maybe resorting to more takedown attempts. Will they be successful? I don't know, but that's really how I could see this fight going, because Islam has made some bold claims, Dom. He said he's going to knock out Volkanovski, and I know people will just kind of say that for the, try to get some people to buy some pay-per-views or whatever, but, he may be caught off guard when he goes in there and he feels the touch of Volkanovski a couple times and goes, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't the power I was expecting from a 145er.
You really just made me think there, because now I'm going to go through it. Conor went up 10 pounds, knockout. DC went up, knockout. Amanda went up, knockout. Henry went up, knockout. Okay? You know who went down and got knocked out? TJ Dillashaw. The one man that didn't go up to try and win a belt. So you may be onto something here. Volkanovski could come in carrying more power than we've ever seen. Maybe people aren't thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about it, but now that's all I'm going to be thinking about all day Saturday until they close the cage door. Maybe, just maybe, if, like I said, he keeps it on the feet, maybe he won't even need 25 minutes of stand-up, Noah.
Yeah, it's the more we're just talking about this, the more excited it makes me. When you could analyze it all day, because both guys have such big strengths. But I can't necessarily say that they each have like a huge advantage over the other, because these are two of the most complete guys out there.
Yeah.
And because of that, like I said, might be a lot of stalemates here. I have no idea. I'm beyond excited for it.
Yeah.
And I hope that if there's one thing I could hope, Dom, for this fine February evening, is that maybe just one person listened to this portion and they were like, I wasn't all that excited for the fight before. But those Joes, those below average Joes, they got me hot and bothered for this fight now. So,
and if that's you, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Let's go.
Co-main event. There is another title fight on this card, Dom.
There is. I think people are forgetting that's happening, to be honest.
It's for the actual interim featherweight title. So this would be basically a number one contender opportunity for a man in Volkanovski's division, Yair Rodriguez versus Josh Emmett. Yair minus 180, Josh Emmett plus 150. I'm happy with the matchup. Josh Emmett felt like the guy who might get left out of this kind of title fight, so I'm kind of glad he's getting it, even though a guy like Arnold Allen, there was really three guys, and one of them was going to get kind of screwed.
Yeah.
You kind of thought maybe Yair felt like the one guy who was going to be in here, but felt like his resume had given him the least reason to be in this spot.
Yeah.
But undoubtedly, he's the favorite. And I also kind of agree with it in a lot of ways. So my question for you at the start, though. I've already made my thoughts clear on interim title fights. I'm not going to harp on it because they're a part of the sport. It is what it is. But does this interim title fight feel a little more valid due to the uncertainty with the main event and the fact that we've yet to see, Dom, a dual champ, a champ, a guy who goes up and goes for another belt upon winning, stay in his original division. It's never happened. I don't think it ever will happen, because the UFC, as much as I believe a guy like Volkanovski wants to defend at both divisions, like if he were to win Saturday, I don't think the UFC is going to let him, because there's just too many variables that can get in the way. You take a fight like here with Makhachev. Let's say Volkanovski wins, but he gets really hurt. he's out for 8-9 months. Well, then you just got an interim, featherweight champion that's just kind of hanging around. So then you come back and fight him. Well, let's say you're out another 8-9 months after that fight. Well, that's going to be over a year since the last lightweight title fight. So it just doesn't really work. And I don't think the UFC is ever going to allow it to really happen. So does that give this fight a little more credibility and being more of a more than just an interim title fight? And you can kind of give your thoughts on if you agree with my assessment or not of Volkanovski going up and down.
Yeah, I think there's a reason we've not been able to see someone really go back and forth, back and forth. The closest we've seen is Amanda, but that's because the featherweight division isn't really a division. So it's like she can afford to do it because she's not stalling another division. You know what I mean? And
But you're right. I did say it's never happened, and Amanda, it did. So I have to, give.
But especially for the men's champions, though, you are right to a certain extent because I think it's hard because the divisions are just full. You have to continue feeding these guys in up and down the rankings. So I think that there's a little bit more importance on this one than some of the ones we've seen in the past couple of years. Both these guys have earned it. At the end of the day, it's a number one contender fight, but they are going to get a gold belt wrapped around the winner. And I'm okay with it. Emmett really, really deserved it. I think they were going to want to give it to Arnold Allen, but I think he had a hand injury that prevented him from this date. So I'm glad Emmett gets the chance. And true, though, man, like he's on a tear, the best he's ever looked. Even though he's 37 years old, he's won 5 fights in a row. We're talking about a guy that's torn his ACL in a fight, went on to still have a fight of the year contender against Burgos, sat out, and has then returned and looked great against Dan Ige and Calvin Kattar, regardless of if you think Calvin won that fight or not. It was an awesome fight. Either guy could have won. Yair, a much, much different last couple of years. We're talking losses, no contests, just long layoffs. It's been really, really strange for Yair. And the win that he's coming off of was due to an injury, with Brian Ortega. Like, he looked good, don't get me wrong. Some people said part of what he did caused the injury, but whatever the case, it was a TKO via injury. So I know how good Yair is. He's 7 years younger in this fight. He's going to be significantly larger in terms of height, I think 5 inches. So you would think he should be able to relatively easily handle Josh Emmett, because I don't foresee this going down to the ground. I really don't, because Josh is a guy that likes to stand and trade. He'll knock you out, but he can easily go 25 minutes. Yair, we've obviously seen him do the same thing. So I just wonder that over the course of that 25, could we see Yair's length and just the way that he's been going about it lately, the way that in which he strikes differently from the other opponents that Emmett's faced? I kind of would favor him, but you just never really know with Josh Emmett. He's kind of a wild card. He's really snuck his way into the elite status of this division this past couple of years. It would be quite the story if at 37, after the injuries and the layoffs, he can come in and get this chance to become an interim champ, fight for undisputed gold later this year or whatever. I think this is definitely bigger than what's presented and what people are thinking about it.
You raise a really good point about Yair Rodriguez. Really, at this point, do we really know if he's ready for this spot? Like, we assume he is because he looked very competitive with Ortega in that first round, and he had that awesome fight with Max Holloway back in 2021. But are we still, it kind of feels like we're still talking about Yair Rodriguez in terms of potential and not in terms of what we've actually seen.
Yeah.
As good as he's looked at times, I mean, his big shining moment up to this point, really there's 2, I guess. The loss with Max, which was a loss even though he did look really good.
Yeah.
And then the Korean Zombie fight, but that was back in 2018.
Yeah.
That was 5 years ago. And like you said, there's been so much that's happened, and a lot of it's been a lot of noise in and out of the octagon, and it's not really probably been good for his career. But that's ultimately why he's the story of this fight for me. Josh Emmett is great and deserves to be here, but this fight it is all on Yair Rodriguez's shoulders here, because if he is to be the guy that so many of us believe he is capable of being, that so many people in the UFC have been pushing him to be from day one. He will get the job done here. And let's not forget, Dom, also more added pressure on his shoulders because he is the next step of that Mexican MMA takeover for this year.
Yep.
So if he is to continue that, really make this a year worth remembering for Mexican MMA, he has to make that leap and become a champion here. And that would be back-to-back Moreno, then him. And that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy who historically has really not quite lived up to any of the expectations or pressure that's been put on him. As high as they've been high expectations from day one with Yair. But we've still yet to – this is his opportunity right here. This is his moment to show that he is that guy.
Yeah. To put away, doubts.
Yeah, and Josh Emmett, I mean, I hate that he's not really a part of that story, but the way that people are talking about Yair going into this fight, you would feel like their resumes would be reversed.
Yeah.
Because Josh Emmett has steadily been consistent in this division. You can argue if he really, Calvin Kattar and him had a very close fight, but something of it I really respect and admire about Josh Emmett is his ability to, he doesn't crack like so many fucked up things and so many just shit injuries and whatnot have really cost him years of his career. And a lot of it's happened in the middle of fights. And you don't see his confidence waver. You don't see him lose focus. He's won fights like the one against Shane Burgos where he tore his ACL, like you said. I admire that a lot about him. And he has had a huge chip on his shoulder way back then. You look at that fight. I remember the post-fight interview. I mean, he really called out a lot of people saying that he wasn't getting the respect he deserved. He's definitely not getting it this week.
Yeah.
So what that can do to a guy, you have a guy who's sort of unproven, but is being almost handed the title already. And then you have another guy who's had to really scratch and claw for every opportunity and has made good on most of them, but is still not getting the credit. That's a dangerous recipe for a guy like Josh Emmett.
Yeah, and like all these fights too that Emmett's been going in, decisions after decisions. He's racking up octagon time when Yair Rodriguez has not. Yes, he had 25 minutes with Max, but we're talking about long layoffs in between. The fight he just had with Ortega was just a couple of minutes long. There's just been more consistency over the past few years with Josh Emmett. You know what to expect of him more, and that's why I think it allows him to be on pretty big upset watch come Saturday night to potentially get his hand raised with the interim championship.
The biggest reason why I'm still leaning Yair comes down to the striking stylistic matchup.
Yeah.
Because I agree with your point. I don't think it's probably going to go to the ground. And in terms of their striking capabilities, they're both good at it, but in different ways. Josh Emmett loves to stay in the pocket, and he has a very straightforward style of striking. Yair Rodriguez loves to stay on the move, loves to stay on the outside, and also does a lot of very interesting and innovative stuff, and he's very kick-heavy. So that's why I tend to give the advantage to Yair. I just think that he's a little more creative.
Weapons.
Yeah, he feels like he has just more in his arsenal.
Right. Yeah.
Josh Emmett, very talented on the feet, but very straightforward in his approach. So stylistically, I just don't love it for him in the stand-up battle, but again, very durable guy. He's far capable of taking some punishment to dish some. So
yeah, very true.
Let's get into some headlines. We got more to talk about with UFC 284, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Dominic, it's back.
Yeah.
He's back.
Yeah.
Everybody get back on the Kevin Lee UFC lightweight champion train because he's back in the UFC. He is re-signed with the company after a one-fight stint outside last year where he headlined Eagle FC card against Diego Sanchez. The fight, everybody thought he was going to dominate, ended up being kind of much more competitive due to him suffering a pretty bad knee injury early on. So I'm a little surprised about this one.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because they let him go And then I feel like the one fight he had since then, and obviously I know that he was injured and stuff, didn't exactly make me think they made the wrong choice. Now I still think Kevin Lee's a good fighter. I didn't think he needed to be cut. Like I think he was
Yeah.
UFC level talent, so I don't blame them for bringing him back. But I'm a little surprised that anything he's done since leaving or since being let go has inspired confidence to bring him back. What do you think?
I think that's kind of the best way to put it. Like, why would you have more confidence in Kevin Lee now than what you did when you initially released him? After from what we've seen with an injury in the Diego fight, but I'm still happy for the guy. It's a big opportunity for him.
Mm-hmm.
Curious to see, is he going to get the weight kind of locked in? He struggled with that a lot in the prior UFC tenure that he had. Is he going to do 155? Is he going to do 170? We know when he was at Eagle FC, it was a 165-pound fight. They had that weight class. And he's a guy that feels really good, that in-betweener, but they don't have that in the UFC. And we've seen that when he's done the 170 route in the UFC, yeah, he can make the weight, but he hasn't been able to perform once he's up there. So he's in a really weird spot. But if he can dial it in, I am still intrigued about Kevin Lee. I'm not saying title aspirations, but I think he can hang with I don't know, man. Lightweight's tough right now, top 15, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say I could see him hanging with some of these guys at 155 and 170 in the top 15. So I'm excited to see what he can do.
I want to agree with you. I'm so skeptical because I haven't seen it from him in a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the last fight that would have, I guess the Gregor Gillespie knockout was the last time.
Yeah, that was big. Yeah.
That was what, 2019, the end of 2019?
It's been a while. Yeah.
I mean, since then, like the fight with Charles, I didn't think he looked all that great in. And then he had that fight with D-Rod, who just, as good as D-Rod is, I was like, didn't really see it with Kevin Lee that much anymore. Yeah. And yes, the weight is the biggest factor too, because I think when he makes 155, he like kind of zaps so much energy out of himself and isn't able to fight up to his capabilities. But then at 170, he's almost too heavy to the point where he lacks some of the stamina and therefore loses some of his fight IQ in the later rounds. I mean, that's been a constant issue for him. So I'm just not and that anything I've seen since then has not made me think that he's fixed any of that or has improved as a fighter.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how they matchmake him.
2023 looking like a big year for the Lee brothers. I mean, his brother is still like absolutely massive on TikTok. So
nice,
good stuff for them. Wait, did you not know that?
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, Kevin Lee's brother is like the biggest food reviewer on TikTok.
Really? Well, that's awesome.
Well, yeah, like I don't know. I haven't gone too into that world, so I'm the wrong person to be telling you this. But I'm pretty sure him and Mr. Beast are like collabing now. Like they're
wow. Well, I will now go down a rabbit hole when we're done recording.
Yeah, Kevin Lee's brother fought for Bellator back in the day.
I do remember that.
Now he's just reviewing food on TikTok, and apparently he's awesome. So.
That's the life.
So 2023, about to be a year for those two.
Yes, sir.
Jorge Masvidal was making headlines, Dom, on his recent appearance on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani. He announced that GameBread Boxing 4 will be happening on April 1st in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This will be available to stream on pay-per-view on UFC Fight Pass. Hopefully they do not price it the same way PFL priced their playoffs. Hey-o.
Yeah.
But anyways, this is a boxing card actually. Yeah. I can't keep up with Masvidal and all his damn fight promotions.
I know. I didn't even know this existed.
He's got boxing, he's got MMA, he's got fucking bare knuckle. I'm like, God damn, I can't keep up with all these promotions. Yeah. So this is a boxing card, Dom. But we got almost entirely MMA fighters on the main card. So from bottom up for this main card, you got Pearl Gonzalez versus Gina Mazzani. Paul Daly versus Anthony Taylor, Vitor Belfort versus Jacare Souza, Jose Aldo versus Jeremy Stevens, and then the main event, Anthony Pettis, Milwaukee's own, versus Roy Jones Jr.
Wow.
So what a mix of talent on this card. I am curious, I know you're not a big boxing guy, but what are your thoughts on this? Like, are you are you on board with the concept? And then two, if it was like $10-15, would you buy it?
I think so. I think I would spend 10 or 15 to watch this. I mean, there are a lot of big names on this at the end of the day. Hey, damn it, we never got Anderson versus Roy Jones Jr., but we'll sure get Anthony Pettis versus Roy Jones Jr.
Crazy.
instead. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely cool. I'm the biggest intrigue, Aldo Stevens. I mean, that caught me off guard. I know Aldo said he wanted to box. Jeremy has always been a striker. They fought each other and Jose won via body shot TKO. So I'm actually very intrigued how that'll go. Vitor, we've seen box before. It got a little ugly there for what was the opponent? It was Holyfield or something.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Vander Holyfield, who had no business being in a ring anymore.
Yeah, didn't like that, and nothing like Vitor boxing against a guy known for his jiu-jitsu and Jacare Souza. So we'll kind of see how that'll go there. Pearl Gonzalez, I know, has done fights like this before. Gina Mazzani, has she boxed much? I don't really know.
She's a former UFC fighter.
That's why I remembered her. I don't know if she's ever done anything like that. And then Paul Daly, correct me if I'm wrong, just retired, right? With Bellator? Okay, that's what I thought. So
and Anthony Taylor was on a couple of, he's a former MMA fighter, but he's made a name for himself from being on a couple of these Jake Paul like undercards.
Okay, well, I mean,
so he's an MMA fighter, but he's probably more known at this point for his boxing fights because he's been calling for I don't know who he's called for. I don't know if he called for Jake Paul himself, but he's been calling for a lot of big matchups. So
I guess if I had to say, then the biggest positive, then I'm glad there's nothing extremely I don't see many dangers here for any older guys because Roy Jones, I know he's older, but he's still going to be pretty solid boxing, I would think, especially against Anthony Pettis. So I don't hate it. And yes, Noah, again, to reiterate, for 10 or 15 bucks, I think I would.
I was very close to saying this was a perfect, just event, perfect opportunity to give a lot of these guys paydays that are no longer able to do so in MMA. They've all wanted to box. You know what? I fully support it. I think I've softened up on this circus side of boxing and the Jake Paul stuff. But this is a little more like something I can get into. Like a lot of legends of the sport that we really emphasize and love. Doing a sport that in boxing that you have to be less, I guess there's less aspects to it than MMA. I'm not going to say it's easier or it's any less dangerous, but it does in some ways feel like, okay, these guys are past their prime. They're mostly retired or semi-active, but they want a bigger payday. Boxing tends to pay bigger, so you know what? I'm all for it. But man, that main event, they really had to go and put Anthony Pettis up against fucking Roy Jones Jr. And I know Roy Jones is well past his shelf life. I mean, that man is past his prime.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still an all-time boxer. And Anthony Pettis is a former UFC lightweight champion, a great MMA fighter.
Yeah.
No boxing experience that I know of.
Right.
So I do worry about that main event. I understand why you do it, the name value. Obviously, Anthony Pettis is going to sell a lot of tickets because Milwaukee is where he's from. Roy Jones Jr. is the biggest name on this card. But man, I really wish, Jorge had to reach out to Anderson Silva. You would
think. Yeah.
Because imagine if it was Anderson versus Roy Jones. Maybe I'm a hypocrite. I might be a hypocrite for being on board with that. Because Anthony Pettis is still active. He's in the PFL. Right. Yeah, he's not looking as good as of late. But he's not in a position of a guy like, I don't know, Jacare, where maybe you're a little bit like, ooh, Jacare got knocked out his last couple fights. I don't know. He's a full jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah.
Anthony Pettis, I'm not too concerned with in terms of his health here against Roy Jones. I don't think he's going to win, but, I guess at the end of the day, I would, if this is $20, I'd buy it, dare I say, Dom.
If Anderson, Roy Jones, though, was the main event, that would have been the
I probably would
storm for
spend.
you.
I'd probably spend 30 at least.
Yeah. I think I agree. How many? I mean, that was talked about for a long time during
I just can't
Anderson's
believe
heyday.
Roy Jones is about to fight an MMA fighter in boxing. And it's not Anderson
And
Silva.
it's not
That's
Anderson. And Anderson's
maddening.
been boxing the past 2 years.
That's what's so crazy. If you would have told me that Jorge was going to announce his next boxing card and it was going to be headlined by Roy Jones Jr., I'd be like, oh, Anderson Silva's boxing on a Jorge Masvidal card. Sweet.
Right. Yeah.
No, but
Anthony Pettis.
I agree, though. Aldo Stevens, that seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Pearl Gonzalez, by the way, she had been in bare knuckle the last couple of years.
I knew she had done some boxing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm on board with all these. Paul Daly in a boxing fight's also gonna, because that's always been his biggest weakness is when a fight goes to the ground. That man, his power is unrivaled by outside the UFC fighters. And
Question.
Very excited. Yeah.
So, obviously, you're not pretty against, but you're a little against the main event in terms of like how it turns out, right? So, what's the bigger mismatch then? Is it Pettis and Roy Jones because of the boxing experience, or is it Vitor Jacare Souza?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's a great question, and some people may scoff at me even pausing on that one. Because I think after I said after initially saying, oh, I thought they almost killed it, knocked it out of the park, but that main event has me a little skeptical. Then everything I said after that kind of made me turn around on it and go, well, it's not that bad. I mean, Anthony Pettis is still a pretty young guy. Like, he's still got a lot of life left.
That Vitor.
It depends. It depends on, are they letting Vitor Belfort go full like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises and just injecting himself with everything from A to Z in the manual? I don't know. If they are letting him just go full TRT Vitor, then yes, that's the bigger mismatch.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
We know what that man when he's on the juice. We know that man is dangerous. And Jacare, yes, he is a guy who maybe that's probably the bigger mismatch here. Just
I think
because
so.
Jacare's he's one of the best jiu-jitsu guys ever. Never been known as a great boxer.
No.
And he's been, the last few fights he had a couple of years ago, he was getting knocked out. And it's just.
Yeah. I'm going to go
like
that
the Kevin Holland knockout was pretty bad. So, I mean, it's.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I'm still, like, intrigued by it. I hope I just don't get sad by any of these fights. Like, hopefully
That's the biggest thing with these types of cards.
Like, I'll definitely have some anxiety watching it, but I plan on buying it. I'm into it. I'm there for it.
Unless it's 50 or 60 bones.
Yeah, then probably not. Then I'll watch Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll get on here and do that. Yeah.
But that's it for the headlines, Dom. Let's get into the rest of UFC 284. I'm going to go ahead and say the 3 fights because there's really like a point I want to drive home about these 3 fights and how similar they kind of are and what we could see from them. Jack Della Maddalena versus Randy Brown. Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menifield. And Tyson Pedro versus Modestas Bukauskas. Dominic, these 3 fights, and I already said this to you, so just pretend like you're hearing it for the first time.
Of course.
These 3 fights these are either going to be 3 showcase opportunities or 3 massive upsets. There is no in between, I believe, for any of these. I don't see any of these fights being razor thin, close decisions, or very competitive. I think these fights are all going to be thorough. They're going to be decently quick. The Jack Randy Brown one, I think, has the makings of going a little longer.
Yeah.
But truthfully, I think you're either getting huge upsets here or these are going to be showcase opportunities for 3 guys the UFC are invested in who are big favorites. What do you think?
Yeah, well, you know how I feel about JDM and Randy Brown because I've been on Della Maddalena train since that Contender Series fight, and I've stuck with him ever since, and he's looked phenomenal through his first 3 UFC fights with 3 TKOs, all in the first round too, I believe, which is crazy. Randy Brown, though, friend of the show, we got to say that every time we talk about him, and a guy that I just view as someone who has really gotten better and better, especially these last couple years. He's put together 4 straight very solid wins And it just feels like he's kind of coming into his all right now, whereas Jack, still 26, nowhere near the competition. I think the biggest thing in this, and it's not Randy because he's 4 inches taller and has a 5-inch reach advantage, but not the size in terms of bigger, his experience with competition. Don't get it twisted, guys. Randy Brown, 10-4 in the UFC, his schedule has been very solid ever since day one in the UFC. And Jack has not had the same amount of competition. So I wonder, if we get that big upset in this one, like Noah was talking about, I think it comes down to Randy Brown just being in more scenarios against bigger, better competition that really could set him apart and get a win over Jack Della. For Jimmy Crute, I'm excited to see him back off of an injury. He's been out since, December of 2021. That was against Jamal Hill. He's still number 12. For Alonzo, he's looked good. 2 straight wins by knockout. I just worry, I don't see this one going long, first and foremost, in terms of the fight lines, if you're betting this. I think Jimmy Crute, being so young, I like a layoff better for these younger fighters because not only can he recover from injury, there's much more time to really put some polishes to his game that we saw be exposed. Because, when he went out, he had lost 3 out of 5 before this layoff. So I think we could see a very much improved Jimmy Crute that could be the kryptonite for Menifield. Last but not least, Tyson Pedro has been a killer since he returned from a long hiatus. Modestas, Bukauskas. I was going to fuck that name up if I didn't look. Got released by the UFC after losing a couple in a row, and he had a bad knee injury, but has recovered, went to Cage Warriors, went 2-0, became the light heavyweight champion. Now he's back. I like this fight a lot for both guys. Pedro is getting a step up in competition compared to the 2 that he's had in his comeback, and Modestas is getting his opportunity back against someone that I think is beatable because, like you said off recording, Pedro, how did you word it about him? About the value on him and how he performs.
Yeah, basically, from what I've seen, I feel like there's the value betting wise and just the market has really inflated Tyson Pedro.
That's what you're saying.
And I don't think, yes, he's looked really good in these essentially squash matches. He's been given very low level opponents up to this point in his return. But this was a guy who had potential back when I first started watching Dom in 2016, 2017, and he was failing to meet those expectations. So, yes, he looks better now. He took time off, heal himself a little bit. But I do think that the market is very inflated on him. And actually, that's even more alarming, that as inflated of a value as they've had on Pedro, and he's been killing all these opponents he's had, he's a minus 250 here. Which is a huge drop-off from where he was favorited previously.
Like minus 900 and stuff.
A lot of that can be attributed to Modestas just being a more credible opponent. Mm-hmm. But maybe, Dom, just maybe, there's a little more to look into with that line. And you go, this guy went from being a minus 900 to a minus 250 in one fight.
Yeah.
Maybe they're trying to tell you something. Just maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I love the way you painted this in terms of you're either going to see 3 big favorites look as they should, or potentially 3 underdogs get huge upsets, but not necessarily having any close fights. So I'm going to ask you this, and I think I even asked it off recording, but I want for the people. If you had to pick one of the 3 underdogs that we just discussed, who would you pick? To give you a second, as of right now, on Thursday night when we're recording this, I think I would actually lean Modestas in his return fight over the other 2, if I had to pick right now, recording.
That's a great question, Dom, because I'm trying to rule out one of the 3 to limit it, in my head.
Yeah.
And every time I try to limit one of them or take one out, I'm like, oh, but this. I do believe that Tyson Pedro is being a bit inflated in how people view him at this point. Mm-hmm. Modestas is he's been on the comeback trail. He's red hot. So there's that discrepancy there.
Yeah.
Jimmy Crute, I'm pretty high on still.
Yeah.
But you take into account he wasn't exactly on the highest of runs before the injury, and he's had a long layoff due to injury, going up against a very big, powerful, explosive fighter in Menifield, could get dicey.
Yeah.
And lastly, I don't view Randy Brown as an underdog like a lot of people do. Much like what you said, I think this is a pretty even fight going in terms of what these guys have proven mixed with where their potential is and who they are right now. As good as Jack has looked, it is a massive step up.
Oh, it's huge. Oh, yeah.
Randy Brown has shown more losses, of course, in the octagon, but he's also fought tougher competition and has more credible wins to his name and has also looked damn good in his last few fights. I mean, even the fight with like Chaos Williams, I think that might have been his last one. It wasn't like a great fight, but he looked pretty good in there. Like even in the stand-up, I was like very impressed with what I saw from him. So even though in terms of how people view this fight and how the betting lines view this fight, it would be a massive upset, I don't actually look at Randy Brown winning as some knock on Jack Della Maddalena.
I agree.
So I'm going to say Randy Brown. And that's my only reason for doing so, is I do think it would be an underdog win for Alonzo, Menifield, or Modestas Bukauskas to win these fights. I don't look at Randy Brown winning as an underdog win. I think he is just as good and could be proven wrong, obviously, because Jack could come in here and spark plug him. But I'm just saying, based off what I've seen, based off what they've proven, Randy Brown's just as capable of winning this fight as Jack is.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like with this one, this is the highest favorite, right? We've got Jack at minus 325, Randy on the comeback at plus 255. So it's the most inflated of the three in terms of like the actual odds. But it does feel like I could see this fight being closer than the other two if we had to pick on one going the distance and being razor thin. I like that. And I don't know, man. It's weird about Modestas, like with his comeback, and if he can get a win here, like 13-5, 1-3 in the UFC. It's not great, but I feel like he's a better fighter than what those two records say. I may or may not be proven otherwise this Saturday.
It's we are sort of putting ourselves out on limbs, but I mean that's what makes it fun, Dom. That's what makes it fun. So they can come back and tell us we don't know ball or we don't know fist or whatever.
We don't know punch or something.
So that's it for UFC 284. But Dominic, there's only one way we end the show around here.
Yeah,
that's with a little segment we like to call closing statements.
Yeah,
point of the show where me and Dominic talk about anything and everything, MMA related or not. And Dominic, I'm going to go first because I have mine. I was going to bring it up on the last one. I said, no, we're going to hold off. We're going back to movies. This is likely what I should have made the topic last time. We're talking about sports movies, Dom.
Mm-hmm.
Something, I know you've seen a few of these. I mean, Jesus. Like, I know Dom don't watch movies, but
I don't know film.
If there's three things I could expect Dom to have watched, it's a horror movie, a Christmas movie, or a sports movie. I feel like those are the three
accurate.
that kind of check off the boxes for him. So, your favorite sports movie of all time, any sport?
Oh boy, favorite sports movie of all time. I probably have to pick. I have a couple in my brain that I loved as a child, but if I still had to pick, obviously at 24, what I would go watch.
Don't you dare say Ready to Rumble.
No.
Don't you dare.
No. But now that you say it, no, I'm just kidding. I got to go the original Space Jam. I have to.
Wow,
I love that film, especially for someone that didn't get to like grow up and see Michael Jordan in his heyday.
True.
It's cool to see that film, and obviously when you add in the Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny, and those fellas, it was just it's a really fun movie. You want to know at least a couple of the ones I had in my brain now that I gave you my.
Can I take a guess on one of them?
Please,
because I feel like you've talked about it before in this segment. Maybe I've already asked this question before. Rocky IV. I'm pretty sure you've.
I do love Rocky IV. Yes, I guess I should consider that a sports movie, obviously, because it was boxing. I didn't think about it just now, but yes, that's definitely.
It's hard.
There.
It's hard to think on the spot, but that was one that I was like, oh, I know Dom loves that one. So what else you got?
I thought of, and these were the ones as a kid that it came to my brain. Air Bud, the basketball one specifically, and Like Mike with Bow Wow. I used to
Oh,
watch
wow.
that movie a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah,
So
these are a lot of movies that I remember watching as kids. So I definitely see where your brain goes for these kind of questions. You tend to go
oh,
more
and don't forget bench warmers, by the way.
nice. So I feel like for you, you put a lot more weight on stuff that you are nostalgic for.
Yeah, yeah, I've noticed that.
I think that's what I've taken away for like a question like that. Um, I'm gonna go sport by sport because I've seen a lot of movies, Dom.
Yeah, yeah.
Only sports that I've seen a lot of movies in. So football, oof, there's there's some good ones like Friday Night Lights is very good. Remember the Titans is very good.
Mhm.
But I think Rudy is probably going to be my
Oh, that's a
choice.
good one. That's a good one.
Um, being that I'm a guy that loves history so much and loves like just that movie just feels like a time capsule. And I just
Mm,
love that learning more about the history of sports and of that time period for football, Notre Dame. I
mhm.
think it does such a great job of showcasing all the reasons why people love Notre Dame and just love college football and stuff, and that it's really easy to buy into Rudy in that movie. He is really exemplifying like anything is possible and the American
Mhm.
dream and all that. So I love it. I love it. Love it. For basketball, because you mentioned a lot of basketball movies right
I
there. And
did, didn't I?
I don't know if I would have said any of those three. Airbud was a shock when you said that one. But I get why. Like I remember loving it as a kid. I could have mentioned that for football. Airbud Golden Receiver is what it was called.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for basketball, what are some ones that I really like? I mean, Hoosiers is a classic. Coach Carter, I remember really
I do like
liking.
Coach Carter. That's a good one.
The original Space Jam is definitely up there. A lot better than the LeBron James Space Jam. I
Mm. I've
didn't
not
fuck
seen the
with that
new
one.
one,
Yeah, I
but
didn't fuck with that one. So do I have like a favorite basketball movie? What are some movies I'm forgetting here, Dom? There's got to be
for
some basketball
basketball,
movies I'm forgetting.
oh man.
Oh, I got it. High School Musical. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
Oh
just kidding.
brother.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, no. But I for some reason that popped into my head. So,
I don't think there's
um,
as many though, probably basketball films either compared to like
ooh,
football or
you know a underrated one. I don't even know if you know about this movie. He Got Game with Denzel Washington and Ray Allen.
no shit. No, I don't
Yeah,
think I know
Ray
that.
Allen plays Jesus Shuttlesworth in the movie. That's a really good
I've
one.
heard that name but never seen
Yeah,
the movie.
Denzel Washington's the man. Kobe Bryant, fun fact, was supposed to play Jesus Shuttlesworth, but ended up going to Ray Allen instead. So
Wow.
Ray Allen also one of my favorite NBA players, so that doesn't hurt.
Hmm.
The baseball one's easy for me. There's a lot of really good baseball movies, by the way, but Major League
That's what I
number
figured.
one.
Yeah.
I that movie is my favorite sports movie,
That's the one.
probably.
Okay. Hmm.
So that clearly takes it, even though there's some other really good ones. I would not have put bench warmers up there, but I get it. I get
It's
it.
incredible, incredible film.
Um, I was trying to think. Oh, hockey. I haven't seen many hockey movies, but the Mighty Ducks. I mean,
I've never seen
so-
Mighty Ducks, bro.
really.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me because you're not like much of a hockey guy. But
Yeah.
the only reason I saw it was because they played it when we were in like middle school.
Mm-hmm.
When it came close to Christmas break, every class was just showing movies like all day,
Rolling the
every day.
TV on the stand, baby.
Yeah. So I remember, I think it was for my choir class. She had Mighty Ducks on, and so we watched that for like 2 or 3 days, and so I remember really liking that movie. So that would be hockey, and lastly for combat sports, this is another tough one because I have a very soft spot in my heart for every Rocky movie besides Rocky 5. The rest of them are awesome. The Creed movies are
Yeah.
freaking
Yeah.
phenomenal. Rocky 3 is actually my favorite one with Mr. T. Clubber
Okay.
Lang. I love that one. But I think I'm going to go Bloodsport. It's
I
Jean
was
Claude
literally
Van Damme.
going to say that. That's what I figured you would say.
There's something so cool about the idea of this secret kumite, like out in the fucking God knows where.
Yeah.
And you got all like the the fucking ambiance of that movie is incredible. If I ran a fight promotion, my goal would be to recreate, make it feel low budget and like
Yeah.
very personal, like out on some island somewhere. Just all these people came there. It was what I was really hoping Fight Island would be.
Yeah.
That's what the Kumite is in Bloodsport. And Jean-Claude Van Damme, man, I was raised on that dude's movies, and that one especially
guy.
was on repeat a lot growing up. So had to give it the edge, even though the Rocky movies, phenomenal. Don't think any MMA movies. Well, Here Comes the Boom is actually very good. So
That's classic all time. Yeah.
stand by that. So that's it. Dom, did you have anything for closing statements? I know mine went kind of long there.
No, that was good. A lot of movies to discuss. I'm clear.
Yeah. Well, my name's Noah Baker. That's Dominic Sleeve. We are but just two of the below average Joes, and we'll see you guys on Monday.